And then at 6:30 there was an evening ceremony, consisted of chanting and circumambulation and so forth, followed by a lecture from about 7:30 to 9 o'clock. Pretty similar to what we're doing here. And when I came in, the way it was done is that a text was chosen and it was lectured through from beginning to end before another text was chosen. So we didn't just do a semester with a text, nor did we do bits and pieces of a text, sort of an anthology approach, but a text was chosen, and then that began, and those series of lectures would go every night, and sometimes even 2 or 3 times a day the lectures would take place. There might be a morning lecture, an afternoon lecture, and an evening lecture, and you went sequentially right through the whole text until the very end. So there was various texts that had been used. When I came in when the Avatamsaka was a text on the platform, on the forum. And so this was my first taste of the Dharma. And that was almost 45 years ago. So in a sense, I'm coming back full circle to where I began with this text. Some people say, and I think there's probably truth to this, that different people have different affinities or attractions or aversions to different texts. And when that text comes up for presentation, my teacher once said it was sort of like a magnet goes through the sand, and those that have the iron filings of that affinity catch to the magnet. So the Avatamsaka is like a magnet, goes through the sand. And if you have whatever that means to have affinities, and this could get very complicated psychologically and spiritually, but there's an attraction, a resonance. Another metaphor that's used is each text is like a note, like C or D or G, like a tuning fork. And throughout the Dharma realm, there are all sorts of living beings who basically are C's, G's, D's, B minor, and whatnot. And when that one is hit, the others resonate because the vibrations go out. They're not hit directly, but they resonate with the main one. So this is how this was presented to me as why people came at a certain time. Whether that's still true or not, we'll see. I think the sutra you should see as the tuning fork or the magnet, and my role is to, as best as possible, hit it every Friday night, or make sure the magnet's going through and not wreck it too badly so that anybody that has affinities would come and would be completely turned off by what I ever do to mess with it. So this is the first text that I encountered and came into. After the bowing pilgrimage that Heng Sure and I did, we continued to explore and translate and lecture on this text for a number of years in Los Angeles and then up in Canada. And then I've been away from it for a long time, at least in a formal way. And so it's kind of both enjoyable, invigorating, and a little scary to come back to it after all this time, because this text was a cauldron for me of transformation, bittersweet, both revelations and I guess you could say bringing up obstacles and afflictions. And so it was a real rubbing stone of my personal growth, and continues to be. The way I wanted to do it here was that every Friday night we will just open this text, and rather than, there's no kind of complete English version that I want to use. I want to come at it chapter by chapter. And so what we're going to do, if it works, we'll project it up to the screen, the English text, and sometimes maybe the Chinese and English for those who want to compare and contrast and look at it. And then there won't be any handouts or books or papers, so you can just focus on what's on the screen. And we'll go into it together, and we're going to go into it the way I was trained to go into it, which was with a questioning mind, an open heart, and with some samadhi prior to looking at the text, some concentration, settling of your mind, and see what it does. There's no way that anyone's going to do an exhaustive explanation or exhaustive inquiry into this text. It's so vast and so profound and so complex with so many layers that you could continue to go into this life after life, not only week after week, and still never really exhaust it. Nor is there only one meaning to much of this. There's many meanings that could be applied. And so collectively, what I want to do is keep the energy going that this is a shared inquiry investigation as we look at the text, how it talks to us, how it resonates. It won't be technically scholarly on my part. This is not a text that I have devoted an immense amount of scholarly attention to, but I came at it more directly, experientially, as a mentor, as a teacher in my own cultivation, and especially on this Pollen pilgrimage, which I'll be talking about. So that's how I want to proceed. So we'll have 45 minutes of quiet sitting, which kind of quiets us prior to it. And then 45 minutes we'll go into the text, and we usually stop at 9. Now you should know that this is a little bit longer than the Platform Sutra. So I will try to up my speed, I'm not starting this right at the beginning. I am starting at the point where Heng Sure and I came into this at the beginning of our pilgrimage, which is chapter 9. So the first 8 chapters, this is something we'll do at another time, or you can look at it on your own, but I'm going to start at chapter 9 and go right through up until the end. And that's a lot of chapters. This text by itself is larger than the Bible. And so the Platform Sutra is considerably smaller than the Bible. So on the other hand, I could make a vow that I won't pass away until I finish lecturing, which will give me a sort of shot at immortality. Cheap shot. But my hope is that even on the nights that I can't be here, somebody will be here to continue lecturing this text and I want to keep the Avatamsaka Platform Assembly alive. I want to have it going in the world all the time. So even if I'm at past 70 now and I run out of energy, chi, life force, or whatever, somebody else will just pick up the torch and keep going, maybe one of you or some of you, and keep this series going, investigating and looking into this Avatamsaka text. So along with that, what little scholarship I can bring, I will bring. Some of you might have more than I, and certainly more than welcome to share it as we go into this. But primarily I'm coming at this as a text of cultivation, a text that has to do and ask the questions, what does this particular sutra tell us about the nature of reality that we live in, about our inner life, our cultivation, and how it is applied to the refinement and the polishing of our nature, rather than an abstract or metaphysical treatise. Now you're going to find that there's elements of all of that in there, but our approach, and my approach always, is to come back to the existential, the applied, and ask what, if anything, this is telling me about something. Let me see what else I would say. So the way I'm going to approach it is starting where Heng Sure and I started with it in 1976 on this chapter 9. And then sometimes, or more than often than not, I might share stories or events or happenings from our experience with this along the bowing pilgrimage, to sort of kind of share that was our experience around what happened with us as we were bowing to and using this text in the pilgrimage. And also, a lot of that has to do with the relationship with our teacher, because it was this text, that teacher, and the bowing pilgrimage that became the triangulation of my formation. And I believe Monk Hure's as well. So there was a intersecting, mutually responding dynamic going on between this text the actual living teacher that came out many times to counsel, advise, scold, instruct us, and often used passages of this text to bring back the specifics of what we were doing to the principles in the text, and all of a sudden we have this, oh my gosh, so that's what it means, or that's what it's about. And then, of course, the personal cultivation of the bowing. And so that personal cultivation with the teacher, with the text, became, and to some extent continues to be, the triangulating forces that I have put together in my own cultivation. So part of me doing this, I will share with you stories and things that happened in the process of doing this, and maybe even have one tonight, just to get us started. So, any questions so far on this? Don't ask how long this is going to take. Yes?
I just want to say last semester, whatever, when you mentioned about that Arthur Waley book, The Tao Te Ching, the translation, your favorite translation.
I mentioned a book last semester called
The Tao Te Ching, Arthur Waley.
Mm-hmm.
I got it from the Chinatown Library. It is so amazing.
Ah.
And I was sort of shocked. I didn't even know there were UNESCO books. It's a UNESCO.
You didn't know there was what?
A UNESCO book.
Oh.
It's a UNESCO book. I don't know exactly what that means.
That's new to me too.
Yeah, it's a World Heritage Site usually. I guess it's a World Heritage book. So, and I was a little bit sad. I don't think anyone's ever opened that book. You know, when a binding is sort of broken
Cracks.
for the first time.
Yeah.
It's been in the Chinatown Library for at least 20 years. I could tell by the date it was brought in. But isn't that what happens with most great wisdom? It's not so popular.
Well, that's very interesting because that is one of the most translated, I think, Chinese philosophical texts out there in English, I believe. And it's still being translated as people are still working on it. What does that tell you? You know, it's like, yes, it's got purchase and it's got interest, and at the same time, getting a definitive rendering of it is elusive. And this goes into the philosophies of translation. What are you getting at when you translate a text? And more importantly, how do you get at it? How do you retrieve meaning? And what has to happen in terms of not just the understanding of the text, but the understanding of yourself, who's the translator of the text, and what's that relationship? And partly, I think, Heng Sure's and I's experience with this text was it changed as we went longer and longer into the bowing pilgrimage, and yet it was the same text. It really didn't change. What had changed was us. And by us changing, the text changed in front of our eyes, so to speak. And so one of the first lessons we got about interpreting or getting at the meaning of the text was it's only halfway to have the language, the linguistic sections of it, and even maybe a philosophical understanding. The other part is the cleansing, the untangling of views and opinions and ideas, and the softening of the self that can go on, that then allows that text to come directly to the heart, and through the heart, as opposed to a projection of one's ego and so forth. So there's a lot going on here. And that was also one of the texts that informed us too. We had memorized parts of it, and the teacher would use parts of it. So whatever we were in our head, in our consciousness, he would use those sections to illustrate and help us. So, yeah. Any other things, comments? Yes?
Question. Does chapter 9 of Avatamsaka Sutra that we are about to study have title to chapter title, or where does it place it?
It does have a title. It does have a title, and where we'll start next week is looking at the translation of that title. Heng Sure and I, just about every week upstairs we get together and formally, informally start just working on this. Again, the 45 years we've been plugging away at this thing. He's got an active translation, retranslation project going with it. I come and jump in every once in a while and throw my 2 cents in. But we were talking about that chapter, which has been translated as Light Enlightenment, which sounds like a new app, or a new food, Light Enlightenment, Enlightenment Light. So we'll look at how we would translate that and what it resonated. Basically, I don't know what the Chinese are offhand. It might be Guang Jue or Ming Jue, something with light, but it could be luminous awakening would be a different translation rather than light enlightenment. But we can look at that. And since some of you have Chinese, and most of you have better Chinese than I do, getting the Chinese text up here every week might be fun to look at too, to see how the translation. Now, not all these chapters have been translated into English. Some have been translated and they're out there in our BTTS version. Some are in the final stages, waiting to be polished and refined. Some, it turns out, haven't been even tackled yet. But then, and next week I'll show you what Heng Sure and I did, is we translated on the Bowing Pilgrimage, and I have this huge 3-ring binder with ledger pages. And every night we would sit down and go over it, and I would write it out in English. And so many of the chapters I want to go to there's our original translations. Now, you who know Chinese will have a lot of fun correcting these. But, we were starting out young and trying to give it our best shot, but part of that I'll be sharing with you as well. Not the stains of the tea and the vegetables that fell on the pages at various times, but so it's a project that hasn't been finished yet. There is a full translation out there by Cleary, and I think maybe Heng Sure maybe has a translation too. I'm not sure.
It's in the works.
But I'm not going to go into why one translation over the other. And by the way, you should know there's variations of this text too. There's one version that came out originally had 40 what they call rolls or zhuan. And the reason they call them rolls is because at that time the texts were rolled up. They weren't paginated, right? So when they got a certain amount, it became a roll and certain rolls. And it wasn't necessarily by chapter. One roll could have a couple chapters or a half a chapter, and the next roll continue. Then there was another version that came out in the Qin dynasty of 60 rolls. I think this was done by Buddhabhadra. And then another version came out in the Tang dynasty that was conducted by Shikshananda, and that had 80 rolls. And so they're not at all, there's some that have chapters and others that don't have other chapters, and we're just going to have to work with that. I mean, it's like, no, I want the definitive. Well, there is no definitive, unfortunately. In that way, it's a little bit like the Bible. There's still texts that are coming forward that might or might not be considered part. And when you get into authorship, that's a little sticky too. The same with the Avatamsaka. Anyhow, I can talk about that more. The one that we're going to use is the 80 roll version. And then there's different chapters. There are 2 chapters I want to mention in particular, very important. Some of the versions have these 2 chapters in them and some don't. And so then sometimes they're listed as separate texts in themselves. So one is called the Gandavyuha chapter, which is chapter 39 in the 80 roll thing that we'll be doing. And that's comes 36, 37, 38, 39. And 39 it's the epic journey of the youth, pure youth Sudana, in quest for his awakening, understanding the Bodhisattva path, where he goes from 53 advisors. It's an incredible text. It's huge. It's huge. It's a text unto itself. And so sometimes that's considered separately. It's called the Gandavyuha Sutta, or Sutra. And then there's another chapter, chapter 40, which is the culminating chapter in the 80 version that we'll be doing, which are the vows of universal worthy, Samantabhadra. And sometimes that's listed in and not in others. So historically, where we go at this, we could probably spend a lifetime investigating this, and then we'd be ready to publish our findings. And some farmer in Khotan or China would be digging a hole and fall into a cave and find yet another version rolled up there somewhere, and then the whole thing would begin again. So, again, getting definitiveness on the origins of this, the authors of this, the various variations of this is interesting, but I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that. That's something you can look into on your own, but you'll find that it's quite a mystery trying to pull it all together. And I think the jury probably will be out, as long as there's graduate schools and people doing dissertations, the jury will be out ad infinitum on these issues, because someone will always find. So that being the case, let me go into a little more. The one thing I want to say why I come to this text is, for me, it started out just as a pretty obscure text. There were parts that I'd listened to when I came in 1976. The text was being lectured, and without commentary, I think I probably would have been lost. So the commentary was very helpful. In the evening, the master would read a section of text. It would be translated to English, and then he would do a commentary on it. And we're going to try to do that here as well, to the extent that I can provide commentary. But it went from a text then to something of a teacher. So it moved away from just being a text that I didn't understand to something of a mentor. And then, as we got more and more into it in the Bowing Pilgrimage, it actually started to become a close friend. Sort of like Chinese Lao Pengyou. It became a friend, not just a mentor, but almost a personality there. And it was a wonderful personality, because it was supportive, bright, not sticky. It was the best of what you could hope for in a friendship, mutually supporting and whatnot. And then finally, for me, it became home. And I say that in the best sense of what home means. It's a place where you find your roots and your flourishings. And as one person said, it's where you have to be taken in no matter what. Home is a place where you have to be received no matter what. Other places can reject you or not, but home is where you can go to and they have to take you in. And so this text has become that for me. And even now, in my dreams, I'm usually wandering in some version of the text as a kind of conversation that's constantly going on. So that's one of the reasons I chose it. The other reason I chose it is it's considered, I think, and others, the largest, most inclusive and thorough treatment of the essentials of Buddhist study and practices. It's really rich and complete. It has two dimensions from, again, large dimensions. One, it portrays the cosmos, the universe, or the universes, as seen by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So this is an enlightened, awakened view of the nature of reality, as seen through. So what you're getting is a picture or depiction of the realm of reality, not only the human realm, but the 10 realms of existence, the entire Dharma realm, and how it's seen through the awakened eyes, not filtered through ordinary consciousness, not the way we see it most of the time, but an enlarged and unencumbered view. And so part of it is descriptive in that sense. And you'll find this throughout. There's just descriptions of realms and places and worlds that we may or may not know, but come through as being part of what is seen directly, not imagined, but seen directly once the mind opens to full understanding. And so this is really interesting because it's a sort of a cosmogony of a large world. It also, on another hand, lays out, I think, what you might call the scope and practices and visions of the Bodhisattva path. So it's got two. It's got a picture of the universe as it's seen through awakened eyes, but it also lays out in great detail what it means to be a bodhisattva. What do bodhisattvas do? What do bodhisattvas practice? What do they wrestle with? What are the stages of their growth and development? So these are the two large themes of this text, the Bodhisattva path and the nature of the universe. It is, and I hope you'll, I don't hope, I kind of hope, but I don't really hope, it's challenging. It's really challenging to go into this text. It's not simple. It's philosophically profound. It has many levels of challenges to us, both rationally and intellectually, but even below the surface of that, where we feel and probe and think from the emotional, from the affective realm. To a large extent, the deeper impulses and what that stir and move us, it goes into and examines us. It's got imagery, poetry, and language that's aesthetically rich, and I would say psychologically catalytic. Really triggers things. I think it's incredibly inspiring, uplifting, cleansing, and strengthening. These are the terms that I would use to describe this text. It's not like any text I've ever encountered before. So these are some of the reasons, besides my personal association with it, why I would want to bring it forth here. For example, I told you one story when I was teaching at GTU, Graduate Theological Union. I just introduced a number of texts as things that people might want to study, and I mentioned the Avatamsaka, and one of the students came up and said, I want to look at that one. Somehow when I heard that word, Avatamsaka, I mean, they're talking, it's not a Buddhist. I heard the word Avatamsaka and something like, what's that about? I said, well, and I suggested a couple translations he could look at. So I thought he maybe or maybe not pick it up. He picked it up, and about 3 weeks later, he came back and he said, something weird has been going on. I said, like? He said, well, that Avatamsaka text? Yeah. He said, well, I got into it. He said, I can't say that I really understand it intellectually, but I got lost. I got so absorbed in it with the imagery, the poetry, and it goes to descriptions of flowers and banners and worlds and waters and so forth that are really powerful poetic language. And he said, then I started having these dreams at night of these images of crystals and waters and flowers and adornments. And he said, and the funny thing was, I'd wake up really refreshed and bright. Do you think this has anything to do with that text? And and for me it was like, duh, of course. So what I'm suggesting here is this text is working on many levels. We come in and we may want to have a philosophical understanding of it, and we may get something. And we may get maybe a sequence of practices that make sense to us. But this text, in its language, in its sound, in its imagery, is working on other layers of consciousness that, for want of a better word, we would call emotional, affective, aesthetic, spiritual. And that has a language and a color of its own. And what you have to do is just sit back and say, maybe I'm not meant to get this philosophically. Maybe it's meant to work on me at a different level, because part of what the Avatamsaka is saying to us, what we call ourselves and our reason and our abilities and our humanness, we're only tapping 1/10 of 1% of what's actually there in our normal activities. That this mind and nature that we have is Buddha. It is potentially capable of seeing what the Avatamsaka is laying out, but only because we cover it over, we don't activate it, we only see things through this narrow straw. And so what the Avatamsaka is doing at all these levels, including reasonable and philosophical, down to habitual, emotional, it's rubbing, polishing, triggering, unpacking it, so that they start to activate in this full functioning. It may seem kind of extraordinary to you sometimes when you react to the text, or bewildering at times, but what's really going on is the text says it's the understanding and expanding of the mind. The purport of the text is to understand the mind states and expand it at the same time. This is right from the Avatamsaka preface. So this is a psychologically powerful text that you're getting into. It could be habit forming, I suppose, if you like it, but it doesn't have any negative side effects. Okay? So this is a text that you can take as a therapeutic medicine that does nothing that isn't salutary, that doesn't bring out things in you that were not seen before. So some people get frustrated because they can't wrap their mind around the Avatamsaka. And if you're used to wrapping your mind around things, this will definitely be frustrating. But if you can say, well, maybe instead of trying to wrap my mind around it, I might let it unwrap my mind. And you might reverse it a little and say, maybe the problem isn't me trying to get a hold of this, but the text trying to get me to let go of my hold a little bit. And so sometimes the numbers in here, you stop calculating. It starts going into millions and billions of quadrillions and so on and so forth. And at a point you're going, and it's like, that's right, that's right. As soon as you want to have purchase and control over it, you're back to a limited consciousness. And so it's got that element to it. Okay, where to go tonight? I'm almost out of time, and I haven't scratched the surface of my intro here. Well, let me just say, next week I will share with you a passage that my teacher gave back in '79, and that it was very important for me. And basically he was saying, because this text can seem so far out and lofty, we could easily make the mistake of thinking it has nothing to do with me. This is about Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. This is about the far out and esoteric. And I want to read to you a section from a talk from my teacher from '79 that really pokes a hole in that. And I think you'll find it interesting. But suffice for the rest of the night, let me maybe say a little bit about how the encounter came with me with this text. That's the story for the night, with only 5 minutes left. And I just was upstairs. I had Heng Sure send Locke a picture. I don't know if you got it, Locke.
Yeah.
Can you project it?
Sure.
Well, he's got to start going, but I'll start talking about it. So how this starts is, in 1975, Dharma Master Sure, who's then a monk, starts bowing to this text, the Avatamsaka Sutra. You'd have to ask him why he started bowing to it. I don't know. But he would do a bow every character. So it'd be Fo, Chuo, and he had the text in front of him. While he was bowing to this text, he had an Avatamsaka-like experience. And he had a vision. Now, a vision, I don't want to make it sound too esoteric, but sometimes you have something in your mind, just you see something, an image of something, or a picture forms of something. It's very fast. Sometimes in French you can say presque vu or déjà vu or something like this. In this case, he had a picture of something, and the picture was he was bowing to and with this text along the coast of California. So that's triggered in his mind. And then it passed. And so he, so he's, yeah, who are those two? Anyway, so he then thinks that he wants to make a traditional Buddhist pilgrimage consisting of 3 steps and 1 bow. You walk 3 steps slowly, you get down and do a full prostration, you come up, and then you walk another 3 steps and you do the same. So that was his vision. And so he went to the master and said, I want to do this pilgrimage. And the master said, oh man, that's really tough. That's not an easy thing to do. And bowing in the monastery is one thing. Bowing out on the road through the cities and towns on the highway, you can't do it alone. You need to have someone go with you. And so a number of people volunteered at that time to go with him. And the master said, no. And so Heng Sure waited and waited. And then I came in 1976, and we were doing the Avatamsaka lecture. It was maybe the 3rd or 4th week I was there. And Heng Sure again made his 3rd attempt at getting permission to do this. He went and bowed and said, before the assembly and the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and I make a vow to do this pilgrimage. And the master, said, okay. And he said, I told you before, you can't do it alone. You need a Dharma protector to go with you. And it has to be a real one, not the mystical ones. The one. And so I, at that time, was sitting in the back of the hall, and I heard him say that, and I don't know what I was thinking, honestly. I just said, I'm back there sort of where Chinwei is sitting now, and I just said, oh, I'll go with him. I'll be that Dharma protector. And there was dead silence in the hall, and all the heads turned and looked back like, what? Who said that? What's that about? And Heng Sure looked at, what? And the master looked and said, okay. Cool. And now I'm saying, wait a minute, he just approved, that's good. And then I started thinking, well, what does that mean exactly? Because it just arose in me. It was like, yeah, I'll do that, that's cool. So my image of what it was going to be was very different than it actually turned out to be. So there I was, in my t-shirt or sweatshirt, my jeans and backpacking boots, carrying backpacks, and protecting Heng Sure, because I was studying martial arts at the time. I said, I can do the gung fu to protect him from baddies on the highway, and I can cook the food and, carry on, and he can do the bowing. Well, it turned out it wasn't quite so simple as that. And before long, I found myself with a shaved head, no blue jeans, and wearing a robe, and that's me up there. In case you don't know who, I'm the one on the left. And so then it was getting ready for the pilgrimage, and this photo was taken the night before we started. So this is at Gold Mountain Monastery in San Francisco. It's in the back room that's facing 16th Street down in the Mission District. And we're doing the last minute planning and preparations for the trip. We're going to fly down with the teacher the next day to Los Angeles and begin the bowing pilgrimage. And I'm in robes now for about a week at the most. What you can't see in this picture is that the robe doesn't fit. It's way too long. I had to sew it on the plane because it was that long and I was tripping on it. I couldn't get it up above my ankles. In any event, I'm pretty green here. And we're planning the trip.
So that's 76?
This is 76, Gold Mountain Monastery in San Francisco.
I like the mobile in between you two.
That was one of the disciples who was a street artist. And he would make the mobiles come and bow and sit during the morning, and in the afternoon go down into the streets of San Francisco and sell his mobiles to make enough money to come back and support his the monastery. So yeah, there are a lot of interesting characters at the time.
70s, right?
This is the 70s in San Francisco, right? There are even stranger characters, but he later became a monk too. Any event, I don't know what else you see there. That backpack there on the bench is, Heng Sure then took a small micro version of the Avatamsaka Sutra, little books like that, and tiny, tiny characters. And he carried that on his back while he bowed. And then in then a larger case we had about this size, we had the larger version in a blue carry case that we would translate at night. So this is, that's the sutra thing. So the thing I want to say about this encounter was very interesting. So right at the beginning, you don't see this is just after the master had come in and given us some instructions. So at this point we're going, what was that about? So two of the instructions, one of the instruction was, okay, you guys are both scholarly and you spend all your time reading books. And then he said, Heng Sure, as a child, you did way too much reading of books. You sat in that big red chair and read fiction after fiction after fiction. So your mind is like tofu now. It's like soft tofu. It's just, it can't formulate, it can't harden because you just wasted it all on story, fairy tales, and fiction. So now, and he said to me, you've read, too much scholarly stuff and whatnot, and you're all in your head. So on this pilgrimage, and we had a whole bunch of books lined up that we were going to bring. He said, don't take any of the books. And books were identity, right? It's like, no, you can only take one book. What book? The Avatamsaka. Okay. So at that point, all the books got out of the room that we had planned to take. I don't know how I was going to carry them, but that was my idea. We're going to have all these books and have, all the books you ever wanted to read. You have all this time bowing at night, just read the books, right? So gone was that. And I said, but I can't read Chinese, Master. And he can read Chinese, but he's made a vow not to talk. So what am I going to read? He said, well, he can't talk because he made this vow, and that's very good because you'll get along a lot better. What? We get along? No, as soon as you talk, you won't get along. So he can translate at night from Chinese into English, and you write the English down, and that's it. So my access then was to have him translate the sutra, write it down, and that was the one thing. And I said, well, but maybe that's not enough, just that one book. And the master said, after you have read 10,000 books, looking at me, you should walk 10,000 miles. And he reversed it. In other words, or after you read 10,000 books, do 10,000 bows. Engage the mind and the spirit differently than in discursive reading. And then he said, when one penetrates, they all penetrate. In other words, he said, enter one deeply. When one connects, they all connect. So go into the Avatamsaka deeply. And that was then that part of the instruction. The other part of that evening was even equally hard to take because intellectually we were stripped and now materially we were stripped. So what had happened was we started out and I realized I wasn't going to go as this layman, I was going to be going as a monk and I would be bowing too. And okay, wow. See, I just saw myself kind of going around watching the maps, cooking the food, checking out the sights, redwood trees, the ocean, and there I am, and I'll be bowing now. Oh, okay. Well, what are we going to do to take care of ourselves? Well, the vision was, you're going to be camping out. Camping out. And I started to calculate, if we bow at this speed, and we're going over 700 some miles, we're going to be doing maybe less than a mile a day. That's over 700 days of camping out. What's wrong with this picture? Well, since you only have a backpack, and you got 700 days, and we also made a vow, he said, and your mind will be clearer and your karma not as complicated if you just vow to stay outside and not go in houses and accept offerings from people. Inside the house, to stay overnight, so stay out. This is part of a Dutanga type thing. I'm going, okay. So just before this, the week before I shaved my head and put that robe on, I had some extra money left over, and I just went to the hot spots in Berkeley, Sierra Designs, North Face, and REI, and I cashed in all that money for the best stuff you could get at the time. I mean, we had super good stoves with layers to it, the best food you can imagine that they had freeze-dried then, and then I got the super good sleeping bags with the pads, and then the equivalent of Gore-Tex jackets. They were called 60-40 jackets then, really cool, and all this really super good equipment, a super nice tent, and everything you needed. And they even had freeze-dried desserts at that time, so packed those up. So Master came in, and that was all piled up on that empty thing you see there. And he looked at it and he said, going on a picnic or pilgrimage? Oh no, we're going on a pilgrimage, Master. He said, well, let me give you some advice. Take along with you those things that nobody else would want. He says, all this is very pretty, very shiny, very nice, but you'll have a better experience if you just take things that everybody turns their nose up at and doesn't want. Oh, yeah. So basically, I moved the stuff off that thing to show that we weren't going to do it. And then when he left, I stuffed and packed it all back in to take on the pilgrimage. Well, I mean, your body bugs are going, whoa, what am I going to do with things that nobody wants? Like the Boy Scout sleeping bags, the heavy cotton, and a tent with holes in it, and then thinking, and cooking pans that didn't have these nice Swedish stoves and things like that. No. And so, and I think he knew that that's what the reaction was going to be. So that's what we're talking about there, negotiating how we're going to get all this stuff done. to make a long story short, as the pilgrimage began in South Pasadena, by the time we got to the coast in Malibu, we'd been through South Pasadena, through quite a bit of LA, then down Wilshire Boulevard into, by the time we got to the coast, every nice article that I had gotten and we had was gone, had been stolen. One night the bag was stolen, next night another bag was stolen, then the tent was stolen, then the pots and pans were stolen. By the time we got to Malibu, all we had was the robes on us, 2 tin cups, and 1 army wool blanket each. And that was it. Nobody, we had those for the rest of the trip. Nobody stole those. But all the nice stuff was stolen. And indirectly, that's how I ended up learning how to sleep sitting up. Because with 1 wool blanket, you really conserve your body heat by just wrapping up like a little pyramid and not stretching out. So anyhow, that's just one story. Next week, I want to go a little more into this and share some more with you on the background and framing of this. And then we'll start with chapter 9 and project it up and continue. Any questions, comments, observations, thoughts? Yes?
The sutra recommendation that you made years ago to the student, do you have a current recommendation for a translation of the sutra now that's different or the same, and what is it?
Our particular translation group that's been working on this from the 70s has out quite a few of the volumes now, and you can find those on the BTTS, Buddhist Text Translation Society website. I prefer those, but Thomas Cleary has a complete translation. And I have some issues with that, but that's one version you could look at if you wanted a complete translation. It's very big, very long. Or you can just go with these chapters as we're going through it and look at them. The other thing I will really say strongly is feel not only empowered, but almost enjoined to work on help with the translation. So as we go through this night after night, those of you who know the Chinese can look at the Chinese and compare it to the English. Those of you who don't know the Chinese, if you read the English, and this is a translation hermeneutic, when you read the translation, if it doesn't resonate, if it goes clunk with you, if you just kind of go away and saying, that doesn't make sense or whatnot, that is a vehicle for then looking at it again and saying, maybe it's a bad translation. Not to assume that the translation up there is definitive or whatnot. Because these texts are not meant to just be understood, but they're meant to be therapeutically applied. It's like food or medicine. And if it's not digestible, and if it's not working, you have to then step back and you don't say, oh, there's something wrong with the text, but you then open the door to say, maybe there's a bad translation here, and that's why it's not coming across. Or maybe my reaction is what I need to be looking at. And that's the reaction there. It's like, well, I don't like that. It doesn't resonate with me. And you go, well, is there something wrong with the text? Or is it poking at one of those places where you're tied up and need to, examine? So in this sense, the text becomes both a window into a larger world of reality we describe, but it's also a mirror. And the translation is where those two come together as to whether or not it's making sense, how it resonates. So as we go through this, I hope people will say, for example, light enlightenment. Heng Sure's reaction to that was, it's too colloquial, it's too mixed up with just kind of expressions out there now that don't give it the gravitas it deserves. What's a better translation? So there's many, many things that are going to happen with this. On the good side, I would say the Chinese of this text is not that difficult. This is one of the easier, even though it's long and huge, the actual Chinese is pretty easy to get at, pretty straightforward. It's not like the Shurangama Sutra, or even like the Tao Te Ching. The characters and whatnot and the way it's done is really pretty easy. And it's a good way to start learning Chinese too, coming here. So lots of things happen. So yes. Okay, anybody else? Would you mind if periodically I drop stories in like this about it or not? I mean, we can just do the text and I keep the stories away, but, okay, keep the stories. Some of them are embarrassing, I might want. Yeah, those are the ones everybody wants to hear. Any other questions or anything? I'm guessing, Locke, will we have the text available somewhere so people could look at it either in advance or carry over so there's a kind of like a record? What do you think?
Yeah.
And then the next question, this is out of my realm setting this up, but we'll have it projected up, just text only. I'm wondering, is there a way to get the Chinese up side by side? Would somebody be willing to help or work with that knows how to do that? In other words, we could have the English on one side and the Chinese on another side. We might not do the Chinese all the time, but people who know Chinese can look. But if we get to a point where we're saying, wow, that English is really strange, what's the Chinese for that? And then we can look at that and we can do a kind of rub on it ourselves in class here. Anybody know how to do that, to set up the Chinese text alongside?
Yeah, I don't think that's a fair problem. As long as you provide the English text, we can put the Chinese very easily.
It's pretty easy.
Yeah, you just put 2 columns, your English text in one place and put the Chinese text in the other way.
You don't need to do it. They'll
You
do
can
it.
do it, just give us the English if you want.
Yeah.
I'll send it to you.
Okay.
I can't even do my tax return, so, go for it.
More complex, okay?
You can.
Yes, you can.
Also, I'm going to be using this because I don't have paper or text in to bring, and I just can continue to have the text in front of me here, so I'll be using this. It was kind of interesting. I was thinking of this text originally came in Sanskrit. Right now, as we talk, there's only 2 extant sections of the text that still are available in Sanskrit. One is the Gandhavya chapter, the one I mentioned, chapter 39. And the other is what's called the 10 grounds of the 10 stages, the Dasha Bhumi. That's all that's left of Sanskrit to us. What happened to the rest of Sanskrit, we can talk about a little next week. But there were 2 journeys to a location where the text was in what is along the Silk Road in a kingdom called Khotan, which is right on the, it's Xinjiang province today. It's way to the west. And at different times, both Buddhabhadra and then Shikshananda went there to get versions of this text to then, with Sanskrit and Chinese, to translate it into Chinese. And so while we have more or less complete versions now in Chinese, the original Sanskrit's versions of this are only partially available. There may be, and I don't know about the Tibetan, whether there's a Tibetan version and how much is there but it has to do with the nature of text in this world and now. You have to remember that, I'm saying, here I got it all, guys. All that Xuanzang went to China for, with all his mules and horses and elephants, and losing some of those on the way back when he's going through the mountains. A couple of the mules with sutras fell off the side into the gorges down below and were lost forever. And I got this whole thing here now. So that's pretty cool. At the same time, we don't know how much has been lost and what happened to it. Some of it was burned on purpose, some by accident, some maybe waiting to be discovered now. Like the Dead Sea Scrolls, nobody knew they existed until this Bedouin kid was going out looking for his lost lamb, was digging around. A hole appeared, he threw a stone down and it broke something, he looked down, it was a weird smell, and there were these containers, and they had these scrolls in it, and he didn't know what they were. And these are probably, along with other sections, the earliest versions of the Hebrew Bible that we have available, and nobody knew about these. So there was Donghuang Caves also had a room, that somebody discovered, knocked it open, and there were these texts. So we don't even know what's going to happen next. Or what people would do is, like this Bedouin thought, wow, you guys you have fireplaces? Well, you know what fireplaces are. Okay, so you put logs on, but you can go to Costco or buy these rolled up things, right? What do they call it? Duraflame or something. Well, this kid thought, these are great Duraflames. So he took a couple of them home, and his mom put them on keep them warm. And then he thought, well, maybe I'll take them to that guy down there who buys these things. And the guy said, oh, yeah, I'll buy this from you. Where are the rest? Well, I still got a few left, but my mom burned a couple last night. So things can happen to texts like this over time where they just sort of, whoa, where did this go, or where did this come from? Any event, we'll work with what we have. We can talk a little bit about this history and so on and so forth. But that's going to be the format. And then we'll just roll on until there's nobody left. And even if there's nobody left, I might just keep going because I like the text so much. And if you come here and you fall asleep, that's okay too. It's really a good place to sleep. Try not to snore. But again, on a Friday night, of all the choices you have, falling asleep in a Buddha hall with the Avatamsaka sort of in the background, one image I'll give to you, and I would say I like this image, because this text is so far out in many ways and so incredible between Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and Devas talking to each other. It's not like, yo, what's up? They're what they're talking about. And so I remember when I was a little kid, I'd be falling asleep in my room and I'd keep my door open and I'd love to listen to the adults talk. I would eavesdrop on them talking. It's like, and I'd understand maybe every third word or something. And the next morning I'd get up and say, Daddy, what's rape? Because I heard that word last. And so what I would say to you is you approach this text, even if we don't penetrate it and you don't come away, see yourself as just eavesdropping on the conversation of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas as they're talking about things. And it's like, wow, I'm just like here at the door of the crack listening to what they're talking about, and let your imagination open up a little bit. We should have fun. Anyhow, that's it for now. Anything else? Any announcements you want to make?
Maybe I can remind about different activities, what we have here at this space at the monastery. And we have lectures, meditations here. Tomorrow, 7:30 p.m., we have Avatamsaka lecture by Monk Heng Sure. And he's lecturing at 10 stages, 10 grounds of Avatamsaka. We are in the stage number 9. So,
And this is one that there's a Sanskrit version for, this particular chapter.
Yeah. So we have Wednesday is Stephen Tainer course of meditation, I can say. He's also looking different texts and he's holding his class from beginning of this monastery from 25 years right now. Thursday we have Inside Berkeley Meditation Community associated with Spirit Rock. James Barras is the one main of teachers. You can check this. Friday we start today and next week also, 7:30 we start here. We have also first Tuesday every month we have Abhayagiri monks from the Thai Forest Monastery up to Ukiah. And we have every so first Tuesday we have Abhayagiri monks. Fourth Tuesday we have Dharma Recovery. So it's the Kevin Griffin, is the kind of pioneer in this movement. So we can check it out. Sundays, every third Sunday we have nuns from Aloka Vihara. Western nuns, so please welcome. Everything is for free. And you can find more information on our website, berkeleymonastery.org. Yes?
Just maybe two more things. Monk Heng Sure will be actually lecturing at CDB tomorrow, Sunday night.
Yeah.
This is 2,000 Buddhas. We'll be lecturing on the probably the 10 transferences chapter. Please start to go up there again, people who are in that space want to know. And the other one, we have a one session coming in mid-October. We want to do a 7-day retreat. That's happening.
And I want to also remind about meditation here every day, twice a day, in the morning from 6:15 to 7:15, afternoon from 5:15 to 6:15. And so please come, sit and listen.
Okay, we'll do the transference in English.
Our minds as one and
hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Bowing respect to the triple jewels.